I'm called Grumpy for a reason, you know what I mean? So I am going to spoil your night, okay? So no problem about that. Anyway, I want to give you a little bit of insight of what it's like to getting old, okay? There's probably plenty of people in here that can understand that. Anyway, so I can always imagine what it's like when you're older and you phone the GP and what the receptionist really wants to say to you, okay? So I phoned the GP and the receptionist answered and I said, is there any chance of I have an appointment? She says, no chance. I says, why not? She says, well, what did you say the last time you were in? I says, oh, I can't remember. She says, I'd just like to tell you, you're a fucking hypochondriac, right? And you've got no chance of living much longer. You know what I mean? Okay. Anyway, I've got another thing to that. But when you sort of get older, medication becomes an important aspect, doesn't it? So I've got a great tip for when you get older, okay? Never ever take a sleeping tablet and a laxative at the same time. Never ever works, okay? I'll just get on. It doesn't work, trust me, okay? Anyway, I've got a bit of a, this might be a bit of a theme, so I'll get into that. So a bit of a theme is that there's these three brothers, they're all in the 90s, and they live together. And then each year they're going to be mentally assessed. So they go off to the GPs, and the GP says to them, right, the same as last year, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to ask you a couple of questions, and off you go. So, he says, to the first one, who was 93, he goes, listen, what's 3 times 3? Quick as a flash, he goes, 274. The GP goes, oh no. So he says the middle one, he says, listen, same question to you, what is 3 times 3? He goes, Tuesday. Can't say it. He goes, oh. He goes to the youngest one, being 91, he says, listen, see what you, George, if you get the question right, you just get away. So he says, hello, George, what's 3 times 3? Quick as a flash, he goes, 9. He goes, oh, thank God for that. Off you go. So away they go, and as they were going out, he shouts, George, that's your question? He goes, aye. He says, just want to know, how did you get to the answer? He says, oh, well, it was easy. I just took Tuesday off 274. Thank you very much. Anyway, so continuing the theme, as we get a bit older, we tend to become invisible. I don't know if everybody knows that. So one day I was in Uncle Greg's cafe, which is in Northumberland Street, you know what I mean? Sitting there minding your own business. And these 2 old girls, about 30, come in. And straight away, you know, they got into the conversation and they said, hey, what happened to that old girl that come into the chemist the other day? I says, nothing, right? She says, you know the one who asked for the XXL condom? She goes, oh, aye, she says, I got a deal with him. She says, what? But he was an old girl. She says, listen. Anyway, she says, what happened then? She says, I learned 2 things from that. She says, you know, the young girl goes, what's that? She says, the fucking bastard had a stutter. And then he turned around and then she said, well, I thought men, you know, older men had good stamina. She says, aye, but didn't want to be shot down me by no blue. So anyway, moving swiftly on, as we get older, we tend to say things what we don't mean, do you know what I mean? And we don't care what we say when we get older. Anyway, I was going to a retirement do, where else would I be going? Do you know what I mean? And so I get off the bus and I'm in Newcastle and I get stopped by this young girl. And she says, listen, she says, can I ask you how old you are? She says, I just for doing a survey. I says, oh, no problem. I says, I'm 68. She says, oh, champion, you fit in for a survey. I goes, all right. She says, 68's fine. She says, I just want to ask you a couple of questions. So the first question was, what was your best age? I said, bondage. So I've went to my retirement do, and I'm apologising in advance for the bitten here, because I'm a bit worried about it, you know what I mean? So I went off to retirement do, and as we go down Newcastle, you know, there's about 30 and we're getting bothered by these 2 groups of young lads, and I thought, I'm going to say something to these when we get to the end of it, you know. So we get to the last pub, which is the Black Order, one of the more salubrious pubs in Newcastle. So, and I'm feeling a bit brave because there's 30 of them, you know, and I said, I'm going to say something to these two groups of lads. So I goes over and I says, listen, I says, you've been bothering us, haven't you? And as for you, you're a set of bastards. And I says to the other group, and you are a set of cunts. And this big man monster got up, he says, listen, I'm not a bastard. I says, well, sit with the cunts then. I just want to finish it off by, if you could ever think of a song, you know, that would make, sort of define you. And as I got older, I thought the best melody and the best song that would define me as an older person would be The Last Post. Anyway, I just want to say, you know, it's been a blast, really has, nervously, okay? But I just want to say, always cherish your kids and your grandkids, because you know what? They'll determine your care. Thank you.